Hey everyone, I thought I'd make a video today on a recent interaction I had just to explain how a bit of knowledge of salesmanship and advanced communication abilities can enhance your ability in everyday situations. So what I'm going to talk about today is my recent acquisition of a new old car. So basically a bit of a backstory as to why this has come about. I recently sold my new car. Well, it was a 3-year-old car due to the fact an investment opportunity arose. So I liquidated the car, put it in the form of cash to be able to use that cash. It wasn't a cheap car, the car I sold. So I now needed to get a regular daily driver, something cheap, easy to maintain, and something that'll be temporary for me before I get my next new electric car. So what I'm going to tell you about is the process that I took to actually buying the car that I bought yesterday, because this situation was made a lot easier by my knowledge of sales and communication. So what I did when I found the car I wanted, I'll give you a quick run through as to how the acquisition took place when I actually bought the car. So I went to speak to the person who was selling the car, and I'll summarize the process that I took in coming to the agreement of the purchase. So the first thing I did was build rapport and trust with the new person that I just met. The second thing I did is I showed interest in them, and I also showed interest in the thing they were selling to me, the car. So I showed that I genuinely was a potential buyer for this vehicle. The third thing I did is I showed that I'd done research and I had knowledge of cars in general. And I also showed I had knowledge of this specific type of car. This was done by doing homework on the actual vehicle before I went to see it, looking up all the potential down the road problems this car can have. So doing the product research, having product knowledge on what it was that I was buying. The fourth thing I did is I made a justified offer with reasoning as to why I was making that offer. I then built more rapport. I then closed the deal. I took it to a close point, and then I did the final step that you do after every close is I shut the flip up, and I let them make the decision whether they were going to sell it to me or not. So I'll take a bit of a deep dive in these different steps of the process that I took to explain how that I approached the situation and got a really good deal on this car. So the summary of why it's good to know salesmanship and communication is like I explained, I got a cheap car because of my knowledge of sales, and I was able to use my positive influence and ability to communicate my thoughts in a structured, segmented way to make an advantage in an everyday environment. So the first thing I did, like I say, is I built rapport and trust. Now, the way I did this, a really good little tip for you if you ever want to build rapport with somebody new, is to be interested, not interesting. I took an interest in the person that I was talking to. I asked them questions about themselves. I got them talking about themselves so that I understood what they did for work, what they like to do in their spare time, because I was then able to create a relationship between me and that person on a personal level to get them to basically look at me in a more favorable light, to like me. So I built rapport and trust. The second thing I did is I showed interest in their product. So I genuinely showed excitement in what the car that was presented to me, told them a bit about my search for a new vehicle and how this one could potentially be exactly the one. I liked the initial impressions of it. And then I proceeded to take it for a test drive. I showed the third thing I did, so I showed knowledge that I'd done thorough research. I talked about all the different potential faults of a car of that age and that range in kilometers, just done by the research. Well, I've got a bit of a background in vehicles and whatnot, but I did specific research on this type of car, on basically Googling it to understand all the potential faults that can occur with this vehicle, which is pretty easy for anybody to do with a quick Google search. So I took it for a test drive. I came back, I had a bit more of a chat about the car, and then I made a justified offer. So I offered, now this car that I bought, I'll tell you the numbers. So they wanting $3,500 for this car, and it was a Volkswagen Golf 2007 model. It was quite high kilometers. It was 190,000 kilometers. It's a diesel engine, so that's not many kilometers. Diesels go for a very long time without problems engine-wise. The problem with that amount of kilometers is usually the running gear, which is the steering, the suspension, that kind of thing. I knew all this from my research. I was able to identify that there wasn't really too much wrong with this, pretty much nothing at all, and it was a really good purchase. So with all of this knowledge in mind, I presented these potential problems to the seller, saying there's a good potential that I'll have to spend money on this car due to the having to replace bushes and wheel bearings, because when cars get to around 200,000 kilometers, they start to need the running gear replaced. There's a lot of rubber bushes and things that need replacement. And I, listed all of the potential negative facts about it, also showing that I was still interested in buying it anyway. And so that gave me the ability to justify my offer, which I actually offered. The car was for sale for $3,500, and I offered $2,800 for the car because of the reasons that I just listed, as well as a few others. I don't want to bore you about too many car details. It's more about the sales process of this. What actually happened is I made this offer a bit later over the phone after I'd gone home, and the guy said, okay, well, can you give me half an hour to think about it? And I said, yeah, that's absolutely fine, no problem. And then he followed up with, so if we go ahead, I can mail you the spare key. I've got the spare key elsewhere. I'll mail it to you. So for me, my eyes, and I lit up, because when he told me that, for me, that is a selling sign or buying sign. I knew that he had cognitively partially made the decision to sell the car to me just from that little interaction that we had about him telling me he would send me the key if he decided it was a goer. So for me, that was the sale done and dusted right there. So I built more rapport after that interaction. I started to talk to him about his job a bit more before we finished the conversation. I let him think about it, and he rang me back. And then what happened, he's like, oh, I'll tell you what, I'm more than happy to sell you the car. I'll let it go for $3,000. And because I'd already had the interaction and read his selling signs in the last little communication process where he told me he'd mail me the key out, I knew he wanted to get rid of the car. So I said, I'm sorry, mate, $2,800 is the limit that I would let go on this. And we had a little bit more of an exchange, and I said, look, if you don't want to let it go for that price, I entirely understand. That's entirely your prerogative. That's what I'm willing to give you. It's up to you. So after I said, I left the ball in his court, the last thing I did, the final part of this process, was I shut the flip up. There was a good 45 seconds of nobody speaking after I said, it's up to you. There was silence. So here's a little tip for you. When you go for a close in any sales environment, be it a buyer or a seller, the first person to speak when you're both shutting the flip up loses. So if I've interjected at that point and said anything, he would have expected me to then, it will be then my turn to communicate why or to bring the money up. So I closed at a point, and then I just was silent. And you probably can guess what happened after that. After the 45-second silence, he said, you know what? All right, it's yours. That's absolutely fine. I'm perfectly happy with that. So I got a brilliant deal on a car. He was happy with the money that he was getting. And this was all brought about to my advantage through my knowledge of salesmanship and communication. So just to summarize that process for you one more time, just in case you want to write it down or something like that, in this situation, the process that I used, the step one was build rapport and trust. Be interested, not interesting. Step two was show interest in the product. So I showed interest. Step three was show knowledge of the product. I'd done research. I'd done my homework on the product, so I knew about it. Step four was make an offer with justified reasoning. So justify why I was offering a cheaper rate than what was advertised. Step five in this section was build a bit more rapport after you've made your offer. Step six was close. So say, make your offer, and do you want to take it? Do you want to take my offer? And step seven, we'll call it, is to shut the flip up. You can probably guess that F usually stands for something else, but for being PC, we'll say flip. So yeah, what I'd ask you now is, if you haven't already, press the like button. Make that little thumb turn blue. If you haven't also, hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to our channel because we're constantly updating you with new information, lessons on how you can go about sales and communication techniques, as well as other things. And if you haven't done the most important thing, down in the website, in the description section of this video, you can click on the website and you can actually sign up your email and name to our mailing list, because we're actually about to release a course, an online course that is brilliant. Not to blow our horns too much, but it's absolutely brilliant. So I would personally be sticking your name down there right now. So if you like this lesson, please share it with a friend, and I'll make another one again soon. See you later.